we're back on this godforsaken platform. On this godforsaken planet. It makes me sick to my stomach talking about this.
Talk about what?
Yeah, what Israel's doing.
I know.
It's, yeah.
Well, they've done it.
But it helps to do it with good company, good people.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine, like, if you're out there, you're basically on your own. Maybe you know a friend or someone in your family who also sees it as you do, but you don't see them often and stuff. So most of the time, you just ingest it yourself and sort of, rage quietly or despair.
Yeah.
On your own, It's horrible.
Does anybody not know what's going on?
Yeah, they do. Everyone knows.
Everybody?
But do they care? Well, to different degrees. It's hard to keep it up, though. When it's 6 weeks,
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Wear you down?
Stop eating, altogether? Or, like, you can't. You have to keep going. It's like when someone dies, you can't just stop. You have to get back up and keep going.
Yeah.
So 6 weeks in, over 12,000 dead at this point, tens of thousands relocating south. And the Israelis, there's footage of the Israelis firing on them too, with their donkeys and carts getting shot at. That's 1 out of every 200 Gazans dead so far. Yesterday, Israel bombed 2 UN-run schools. Both were full of children at the time, an estimated 500 dead kids. Also last week, they blew up Gaza's parliament building and mosques. They seem to be deliberately targeting refugee camps at this point. I mean, there's no harm in just making that assumption. Or indeed any facility building large enough that could house refugees. So obviously the hospitals as well. I presume so that they keep encouraging people to move southwards. They're also, of course, they must be deliberately targeting journalists. There are over 60 at this point. It's creepy because they seem to know when the journalists are on air or at work, because they're at work and they hear that they're home with 11, 12 plus people inside were all killed. Which completely makes a mockery of Israel not knowing what was coming on October 7th, because, like we've said before, they know everything, where everything is at any given time in real time in Gaza. They have total ISR oversight, as they call it in military terms, of everything that moves in that place. The Israelis have now... Oh, yeah, well, this is the main narrative shift in the last day or so. Remember, the justification for targeting Al-Shifa Hospital and then taking it over, we saw the results of that last week. The Israeli army moved in and showed off, quote-unquote, evidence of this Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City being the, quote, headquarters, the beating heart of the Hamas command infrastructure. They've now shifted that to... Actually, it turns out the real headquarters of Hamas is in Khan Yunis, the largest city in the southern sector of Gaza Strip.
That's convenient.
Do we even need to tell people what they're doing? I mean, no, it's obvious.
I don't know. This is like, my approach to the whole thing is like, I don't know. I look at social media, I look at the media, mainstream media and stuff, what they're saying, and it's like, what are y'all talking about? Why are you still talking about this? You know what I mean? It's like, why you... It's not rocket science.
That's to say.
Rockets.
Rockets are involved. But
rockets are involved, but it's not rocket science. It's... the whole hostages thing is a ruse as well, obviously. It's almost like there's no context. People don't know. They do know the context, but they ignore the context. They're all living in the moment. They're all practicing mindfulness, and living in the moment only.
It's the Western religion, yeah. These
devoid of context, and they only analyse what's actually happening from day to day, devoid of any context. Or they only analyse what's happened over the past 6 weeks, since October 7th, in itself, without any longer, broader context, which is bizarre. Like, nobody does that. Nobody ever does that.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
History began 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And
they have form. History began in Eastern Europe on February 22nd, 2022.
right,
You know,
yes.
Putin just invaded. You know,
Because people don't know and they're not interested and they don't want to know. I don't know. And also, apparently now another thing that's, that it's a new thing that has never been true in human history, but it is now, and it's that you can kill civilians, like indiscriminately kill civilians while still being the greatest, or the only democracy in the Middle East, and closely aligned with the greatest democracy on the planet. The freedom-loving, great democracy that is America and Western Europe by extension, and by extension Israel. So countries that have that label or see themselves in that tradition of being the freest and most democratic countries in the world can sanction indiscriminate killing of civilians, including women and children, and it doesn't change their status. It doesn't make them, tyrants or any other, the opposite of freedom and democracy, right? It doesn't make them the opposite of that. Usually when any country, slaughters, indiscriminately slaughters civilians, they get, throughout human history, they get, maybe not throughout human history, but certainly in the modern era, they get bad rep, they get bad press. But
pushback of some kind.
Yeah, they don't come out of it looking good. They don't get to hold the moral high ground. But apparently Israel somehow managed to claim that it has the moral high ground, and there's people who support it. And it's amazing. I mean, I suppose it's natural. Like when the Ukraine business started, like all the pro-Ukrainian people came out. Like, I don't know to what extent those are paid, or like they had the NAFO trolls and that kind of stuff who were not paid but organised in a certain sense. But as soon as this thing happened, it was like very quickly it was the pro-Israelis were just all over Twitter, and they've gained. They just pop up in my feeds all over the place, which I suppose is normal. It's the social. It's the soapbox, right? It's the street corner, digital street corner, speaker's corner, and so you're going to get people expressing their opinion. But it's weird just to see them all trying to justify what is clearly unjustifiable.
Yeah,
Don't know.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, it's more particularly baffling for known public figures of some degree of fame or another expressing support. Random accounts that pop up, sure, you can dismiss those, or they tend to be outnumbered. But there's a high number of people who are public figures. Jordan Peterson, for example, articulating support.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard. I like to think that I question myself all the time, my narratives and stuff. I have a narrative. I see, what my beliefs, my perspective on any given situation. I like to question those and put on the other side's perspective. And when I hear people like you mentioned, Jordan Peterson or whoever who are pro-Israel and stuff, I go, okay, let's see if I can actually adopt their position and see if I can make it fit in a certain sense. See if I can understand where they're coming from. And to be honest, I can't. At least not if those people supporting Israel claim to be moral people or see themselves as good people and who are pro-justice and pro-peace,
and truth.
And pro-truth, yeah. Sorry.
I saw at the beginning of an interview with Candace Owens did with Norman Finkelstein, and she introduced him. Here's Professor Finkelstein, published blah, 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 and he's pro-Palestinian, blah, blah, blah. Hi, welcome, and off you. And he said, I'd just like to clarify something at the start. I didn't get into this as pro-Palestinian, per se.
Pro-truth, yeah.
I'm for the truth and justice resulting from the truth of any given situation. That's how I found myself in the 1990s reading as much as I could independent reports. He said, I'm not interested in what the Israelis say now here and what Hamas or Fatah or the PLO say over there. What can independent voices tell me about the situation? And I built it on that. And that's, so it's truth, which is
The
what
truth.
we would like to be driving all our favorite voices on, who apparently do speak for truth and justice on a whole raft of other issues.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then-
what's
and
that?
then
So I
fall
don't
flat.
understand how they miss it on this one. How they missed, because it's glaringly obvious.
Right.
Other positions they've taken, the truth and justice position on other issues, more complicated and more nuanced and harder to actually come down on one side or the other based on just using truth or justice. The more nuanced, but this one's super easy. Like,
Yeah.
so how can you miss this? The really easy one, but be able to figure out the more complicated one. It's weird. Weird. I suppose it's just
I have some ideas, but
ideological possession.
I titled the
Beliefs.
show, well, we can adapt this, but why is Israel's security do or die for the West? I'm going to try and answer it. But first I want to kind of do more news updates, so to speak, on the issue. People know this already, but I don't remember if you said it on an earlier show in the last month or to me just before a show or something. But we were thinking about what's Israel's plan here, because this will naturally come to an end like all the other ones, Cass-led, et cetera, in 2014, 2009, so on. And we'll be back to something of the status quo, and there'll be a humanitarian crisis. So, would you think that's changed now? I mean, they do seem to be more forthright in having a plan to expel Gazans altogether.
That was the plan all along.
Okay, that is, yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't realize that, then you're missing. I mean, you're deluding yourself. I mean, one example is, I don't have the video here, but it's from last week. I think they were somewhere in Gaza, in northern Gaza. They bulldozed a memorial to Yasser Arafat. Right.
Yeah.
And then there's this one, which was just a few days ago, where I don't know if people remember the Mavi Marmara, which was it's called the Freedom Flotilla, back in 2010. So this was a fleet of ships basically, but one of the biggest ship was the Mavi Marmara, and they had 10,000 tons of medicine, food, and construction, because it was a blockade of Gaza at the time, and they were trying to bring. So it was an international coalition of peace activists.
And this particular ship came from Turkey.
And this
Marmara.
Right. And it had a lot of Turkish people on it. Had several hundred people on it, 700 passengers on it, and 700 passengers and crew members. That's it down in the bottom left there, if you just scroll down a little bit. And they tried to break the blockade, because at the time the Israelis were blockading Gaza, which is like, again,
which had been ongoing since 2005.
I mean, I don't know. Where's Jordan Peterson in 2010? Where was he? In watching that.
Toronto University.
Or many other, just oblivious to it all, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
So people have to understand, that we've been watching this for a very long time, and we also come from a particular perspective that we'll maybe talk about as well later. At least I come from a particular perspective, but I think it's general as well to us here. But this Mavi Marmara, tried to get all this aid into Gaza. The Israelis boarded it at sea and killed nine of the Turkish members on board and brutalized a bunch of others. I was actually invited to go on it, and I decided not to, because I don't know. I was washing my hair. No, there's no point. 700 people. What
could one more?
Well, what was being offered to me was like an opportunity to report. To be there, to provide reports for our social media at the time. Anyway, I didn't go, but my point here is that there's a monument there. If you click on the right hand picture, there's a monument. That's it on the left. A monument to that in Gaza, the silvery thing with the ball on top, and
at the port there in Gaza.
Yeah, and the Israelis, decided to take the time to destroy that. Bulldoze it, I suppose, knock it down. So between Arafat, the memorial to Arafat, who's dead quite a long time, 20 years, and goes back a long time, and then this, which was just a memorial to the sentiment of many people from around the world who wanted to provide aid, medicine, etc. to Palestinians, they decided to destroy that. So they're destroying the history of the Palestinian people here, at least the recent history, that shows an intent to wipe their history out.
It's more than just getting Hamas.
Well, it's got nothing
right
to do with
there.
getting Hamas, really. It's really got nothing to do with that. So their plan all along has been to, like I said, to this was their 9/11. It was their kind of cataclysmic event, their new Pearl Harbor, Israel's new Pearl Harbor, and of course, again, there's some evidence that it was contrived in one way or another, and trumped up the number of deaths. There's just recent report from Haaretz saying that at least one Israeli Apache attack helicopter killed unknown number of people at the concert by just firing missiles and machine guns at cars. Not distinguishing between. They couldn't distinguish. Let's say they claim they couldn't distinguish between. Were these people Hamas? Who were in the cars? Don't know. Let's just shoot at the cars and see what happens. So an unknown number of people that were until now ascribed to, or deaths of people at the concert that were ascribed to Hamas, have to be laid at the doorstep of the door of the Israelis themselves, the Israeli military.
I have that report, Haaretz. It's in Hebrew though.
No, there's an English version. Yeah.
You have one, okay?
Yeah.
This is interesting. Everyone knew that, but whatever. This report was this basic claim that the response to Hamas, the Hamas incursion into southern Israel, was basically crazy and just resulted in Israeli military killing a lot of its own. That was already in the news, in Israeli news, in
eyewitnesses
at the end of October.
In the kibbutzim, yeah.
3 weeks ago. Then that was fact-checked as fake news when Israel published remember the greeny footage? I think it's infrared footage from the Apache helicopter shooting at cars, everything, fleeing fields and stuff in the area. And then on Twitter, for example, there was a community note attached to any claim that this was an Apache shooting at festival goers at this rave. But we've already heard the pilots of one of those helicopters from 2 weeks prior say, yeah, we weren't sure. We were just shooting at everything that moved. Yeah. Anyway, so Haaretz then this week.
Yeah, this is
unfaked news that.
And of course, it's not in the title. It's in the actual. It's only a short article anyway, but it's Israeli security establishment. Hamas likely didn't have advanced knowledge of the Nova Festival. So basically, in a way, undermine their argument there as well that
showing intent.
That there was there can't have been intent because they didn't know that they only found out about it through drones or from those flying in parachutes. Anyway,
I think that might be paragliders.
Yeah, parachutes.
Just a mistranslation.
The growing assessment in Israel's security establishment, growing assessment. Yes, it took 6 weeks to figure this out. Is that Hamas terrorists who committed the October 7 massacre didn't have advanced knowledge about the Nova Music Festival. And it's based on terrorist organizations and blah, 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 which revealed the terrorists intended to infiltrate the kibbutzim, which, that makes more sense that when Hamas fighters and other Palestinian resistance fighters in Gaza staged their breakout, that they were heading for the nearest kibbutzim, which were just a few kilometers away from the Gaza border. According to a police source, the investigation also indicates that an IDF combat helicopter that arrived on the scene and fired at terrorists there apparently also hit some festival participants. So in total, 364 people allegedly that's the official figure, were killed at the festival. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think we can accept that figure. That's the first figure I've seen them use. That's not a bloody round number. Mm-hmm. And they have released, well, I've seen anyway, some footage of the aftermath, and there are piles of bodies in different tents and behind bars and stuff. It's grotesque. So 364, let's go with that, right? That's how many people killed there at the rave. Mm-hmm. What gets me is that though they still have a round number for the overall fatalities from the nearby kibbutzim plus this. It's still around 1,200. Now they admitted this week that some of the images they had previously shown international media, charred bodies and so on, were not in fact Israeli civilians. They were Hamas. I don't know how they can be sure of that, but they're saying the bodies are so charred we can't tell. Okay, fine. That you'd expect that. There's such a you've left such a mess by firing missiles on places, you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But what still gets me is that they're still using a round number.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you don't know who's who, but how many?
Yeah.
That's not established yet, 6 weeks later. Now, in Gaza, right, there's a lot of critique. Is it counter-propaganda, maybe? Well, the Gaza health authorities, in brackets, run by Hamas, they say the numbers of dead are up to this much. But, it's a war zone. Exactly, it's a war zone. It's chaotic. Maybe it's inaccurate. Maybe it's more. Whatever. They can't get a precise number day to day because the bombs keep falling. But in Israel, the situation is secure. And 6 weeks later, they can't even give their own population the exact number. Like, maybe you don't know. Maybe it's messy. Like we saw in Hawaii with the wildfire. What they did was they had a number, a death toll that was going up. And then there were people missing.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to confirm whether they were in the town or not. And then eventually those two numbers settle on an exact figure. But they don't have a missing number in Israel.
No.
It's just around 1,200.
Well, nobody with any sense is taking that figure as accurate, and also nobody with any sense believes that, given the evidence, like the evidence that we've just talked about, and also the evidence of eyewitnesses and survivors from the kibbutzim, who said that explicitly, one woman at least said that that most of the people killed in her kibbutzim, which was 100, I think, were killed in crossfire. She said, and she even said, it was our side that killed them. There were tanks destroying houses, all that kind of stuff. So the whole thing, that's first-hand evidence. That's eyewitness, on-the-scene evidence. And then you have statements by Israeli helicopter pilots, and you have reports from Haaretz saying that they actually killed people. So nobody can take that figure of 1,200 which is being used to say and run with it as Hamas killed 1,200 Israelis. They clearly didn't. Based on the evidence, it's very unlikely that they did. So the question is, how many did they actually kill, and how many civilians did they kill? Did they kill any civilians? Don't know. The point about it is that's all by design, basically, because, like we talked about in previous shows, the Israelis, various different luminaries in the Israeli establishment, in their political and social and cultural establishment, have for literally more than 20 years, but certainly for 20 years, in a kind of concerted way, have had a plan, a desire, a strong wish to deal once and for all with their Palestinian problem. And that means getting rid of the Palestinians completely, including from the West Bank, ideally, but certainly from Gaza. So they've had this, they've on the record as saying that this is necessary, it needs to happen. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, the time wasn't right. They've said this for this to happen, but we need to wait until the time is right, and it will be right at some point. And they even said, that one historian said that they needed some kind of cataclysmic event in order to get public support behind this final solution for the Palestinians, or for at least for the people in Gaza. And then one appeared, and that's why they call it Israel's 9/11, because not in the sense that they mean it, it is actually true that it was used as a justification to fulfill long-standing, or to achieve long-standing goals, or to enact long-standing, or take long wished for action in a certain direction. In the case of American 9/11, as we know with PNAC documents and all that kind of stuff, there was clearly in the American establishment and think tank establishment, the actual bureaucracy behind the government, that they wanted to project American power into the Middle East to offset the change in, what as they saw it even at the time, the coming change in the kind of potential change in the global world order, where America would no longer be the hegemon, and they needed to project the American military en masse into strategic areas of the globe. And they did that with Iraq and Afghanistan, and then Syria, and then Libya. So this is Israel's 9/11 in exactly the same way that they've had a long-standing desire to get rid of the Palestinians, but they didn't have the political capital or will or public consent. They figured, or even international enough international sympathy or acquiescence in order to take that kind of an action, because they know it's going to be fairly brutal. You know what I mean? It's going to be seen in the absence of some catastrophic or catalyzing or cataclysmic event, where in the case of America's 9/11, America itself was attacked, or in the case of Israel, Israel was attacked, you need to be seen to be attacked in order to justify carrying out the kind of aggression that they knew was going to be necessary to achieve their goals. In the case of America, invade Iraq, invade Afghanistan, kick off a civil war, and fuel and fund a civil war in Syria, bomb Libya, kill Gaddafi. Unless you're already a victim, unless you can show that you've been inflicted a serious and deadly wound that justifies that kind of action, if you just do what they did off the cuff, you're seen as if you do it without any justification, you're seen as a global tyrant, and you can't be talking about freedom and democracy, right? And in the same way, Israel would be already, by a lot of people, seen as an oppressor of the Palestinian people, would be seen as just a bloodthirst. It would be 10 times worse if they just decided one day to do what they've done in Gaza, in the absence of this very helpful wound that was inflicted on them by supposedly.
And they know that's not enough. You have to keeping your people on side. So when there is an in-your-face atrocity, your, let's say, natural allies will have something to counter. So this one, for example, from a couple of days ago on CNN, CNN analysis, video suggests IDF might have rearranged weaponry at Al-Shifa prior to news crew's visit. A bit,
par for the course,
not just rearranged, but planted. They bring them in. Oh, there's weapons. Oh, look at this. There's a stash of weapons right here behind the MRI machine. Like, anyone who knows anything about that, they wouldn't have been left there, because you can't leave it in the same room as an MRI machine because it's magnetic. To keep them on board, it's not enough just to have the wound. You got to keep ticking it over, right? But it's wow.
It's stunning gaslighting. Like, I mean, I don't know. It's not even gaslighting. Well, I suppose it is gaslighting, yeah. But it's amazing that
it's a mockery if you know what it really is. It makes a mockery of.
Yeah. It's stretching the whole their narrative way too far. Like, I mean, when you find yourself killing 12,000 civilians mostly over the course of 6 weeks, 2/3 of them women and children, and then you actually open your mouth to try and justify it. As a democracy, we're peace-loving people, we're just defending ourselves, and we've just killed 12,000 people, most of them women and children. What? I mean, okay, well, most people will sit back and go, okay, but nobody believes you. Of course, no one believes you. Everybody thinks you're just massacring civilians, and they'll never forget it. Only the super dupes are gonna buy that narrative. Like,
there's being duped, and then there's a big element of fear as well. Netanyahu had a warning for any Westerners who might be thinking of
joining the jihad,
changing position, or I don't know, condemning Israel rather than Hamas.
Oh yeah. Don't even think that, he says, or I'll come after you.
Netanyahu warns of terror attack in West if Israel loses to Hamas.
Oh yeah, is that a threat?
Wow, it's ostensibly it's a warning, you see.
Netanyahu threatens terror attack in West. Can we change that word, warns of, to threatens?
Right on cue, within a day, the New York Post reported that a neo-Nazi 19 pleads guilty to plotting mass shooting at Michigan synagogue. That probably predates. It was a trial, so the incident is probably older, but that's the kind of thing we look forward to now, I suppose. More atrocities, more wounds, to keep you in fear of, well, ostensibly of Hamas / Iran / Islamist terrorism / migrants, right? But really, it's going to become clearer and clearer to people that it's to keep you afraid of what the powers that be could do.
Yeah, you can't really push that so far. There's this guy, I don't know who this guy is, actually, I never saw him before. His name is Matt Wallace. He's got 1.3 million followers on Twitter. He's some dude. Anyway, I just saw this morning. I was like, oh, I've never seen that before. Rumours are circulating. Rumours, just new rumours. Never heard before. Rumours are circulating that circulating that the Israeli government orchestrated 9/11 as a false flag attack to get the United States military involved in their conflicts in the Middle East. Do you believe that is possible? Nah, dude.
Is that a yes or no question?
Yeah. It's like, nah, no way, dude. I've never heard that before. That's the most outlandish theory. I mean, where did you come up with that? I mean, no one's ever said that before. Okay, so, you know, I'm glad you've come out from under your rock, this guy, Matt Wallace, and joined the reality-based community, or just joined reality, wherever he was the past 20 years, but rumours are circulating.
Yeah,
Shock.
I don't know whether to
Shock news alert.
lampoon him or praise his, you know.
Well, I'd pat him on the head and say, yes, that's right.
Well, maybe he's being cute here.
Maybe, yeah.
You know?
I don't know.
He knows that people live in parallel worlds, and he's just, I'm just putting the question out there kind of thing.
Scroll down a little bit there, Scotty. To the comments. Do you see any book covers? Scroll down a bit. Good bit.
He may not see, oh,
is that all there is? Looking for a book cover.
there.
Anyway, we'll just leave that there.
Oh, look, there's a name there. Looks familiar.
Yeah. You have to understand.
That can't be our joke.
It's kind of tiresome, you know, for us. We understand that some people are just waking up right now, but
when was that published?
2006.
6.
Almost 20 years ago. Well, 17.
Some other news in the sense of developments. There's one from The Intercept. U.S. quietly expands secret, whatever, military base in Israel. This was... there are actually 2 bases in Israel that are American only. This was published a couple of weeks ago, but it's actually 2 months before Hamas attacked Israel. The Pentagon awarded a multi-million-dollar contract to build U.S. troop facilities for a secret base it maintains deep within Israel's Negev desert, just 20 miles from Gaza. Codenamed Site 512, the long-standing, I think it's from 2012. U.S. base is a radar facility that monitors the skies for missile attacks on Israel. On October 7th, however, when thousands of Hamas rockets were launched, Site 512 saw nothing because it was focused on Iran, more than 700 miles away. Right, whatever. That's an interesting site. Built, like I said, built in 2012, and it shows you that how long they've been prepping for this. Let's call it whatever form it comes, Great Middle Eastern War.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is kind of like this doesn't really house U.S. troops. We had a look at it. It is deep in the Negev desert. You can see an outline of it anyway when you go on Google Maps. But it's not actually housing lots of U.S. troops. There is another facility, though. This other next report comes from thedrive.com. This is published 2019. U.S. Army opens permanent base in southern Israel as Trump slams Iran deal. Again, it's to do with Iran. And this place is operational and houses an unknown number of U.S. troops. The report itself doesn't specify where exactly it is. So it's this is a bit more secretive. The missile radar site we can find, but this one I can't. I think it's embedded within an Israeli base. So it's still not quite a U.S. base. Anyway, I'm only mentioning this because actually up until now, all these 75, 80 years, there's not been a U.S. military base in Israel proper.
That you know of.
That we know of. But since 2012, the radar/missile installation site, and then an actual base housing U.S. troops since 5 years ago. This one, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but I think it's similar. It's only about 20-some miles east of Gaza as well. It's right there. It's very close. East. So that's all I got on news per se. We heard Nikki Haley, the RNC candidate, say more than once over this last month that Israel's war is America's war. Now Ron DeSantis has gone one further. Okay, have a listen to this. This goes some way to maybe trying to answer what the hell is going on with Western elites in general all being in complete lockstep with whatever Israel wants.
And it gets to me that we have forgotten why we stand with Israel. So my question for us at the table is that why do we stand with the nation of Israel? Not what, not how, but why do we stand with them?
I think there's a number of reasons. One, they're our only tried and true ally in the entire Middle East. They're the only democracy in the Middle East. They're the only country in that region that shares our values. We have a great economic relationship. We have great cultural ties. And that's been true for the 75 plus years that they've been in existence. But Israel is a special country because our entire civilization, Western civilization, was birthed in the Holy Land. We are based on the Judeo-Christian tradition. You would not have the United States of America if you did not have the thousands of years of history that is represented in the Bible. And if you go to Israel and you take out your Bible, you can walk exactly what is recorded there. It is real history. And that is just something that's unique. There's no other country that would have that type of resonance with us, given the history where you have obviously the Old Testament and then the birth of Christianity. So, and for those of you who've gotten to go, I know Bob, you've gone.
Scotty.
It will change.
That is obviously complete horseshit. But, and he may or may not believe that, the Bible, of course, is not real.
Historical. It's not a historical argument.
That completely overlooks the Greeks, the Romans, whatever. But that kind of thing is said often enough in the United States especially, that they come to believe it or they come to behave based on that sloganeering. This religio-mythic rationale, it's horseshit. I mean, just take for one counterexample, Shlomo Sand is like arguably the top historian in Israel proper.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading his book at the moment, The Invention of the Jewish People. It's just how many of the myths of that Israel, modern Israel relies on are not true. There was no exile of the inhabitants of Judea/Roman Palestine after either the Roman Jewish War of 70 AD or the subsequent Bar Kokhba revolt of 135 AD. There's no evidence, archaeological, physical evidence for an expulsion. And Sand notes that when modern Zionist Israeli historians try to make the two fit, actual history versus biblical history, they can't. They never do. Their last best bet, which they kind of settled on now, that the modern current consensus in Israel is to say that the expulsion of the Jews that made them the wandering Jew all over the world was a result of the Arab conquests. There's also no evidence for that. Sand says the best available evidence shows that when the Muslims came, the people who were there, the Jews/Judeans/ Israelites, converted to Islam. This is and if he's right, this would be the darkest irony at the heart of all this. The Zionist waves of settlers who've come in and are now slaughtering the people in Gaza are actually slaughtering, for the most part, their own ethnic descendants. If indeed they have, each of them, it depends on where they've come from in the world, whether or not they have a genuine ethnic historical link to the place. They're slaughtering people who converted to Islam a millennia and a half ago, but who are actually native Judeans. That's the best explanation that makes the two stories, actual history and biblical history fit. But we've run with this.
But we've talked about this before. We talked about this in the show about what, like, I've thought about it and talked to people about it and stuff, about what makes a Jew. You know, what is a Jew? What makes you Jewish? You know, I mean, like, a notable Jewish person is a guy on social media, a Canadian guy called Gad Saad. He's he works. He's a economist or marketing professor at University of Toronto, maybe. Anyway, and on his Wikipedia page, he's on this topic. He's fairly reasonable. He's not a hysterical Israel firster, but he is obviously pro-Israel and anti-Hamas, and he just he buys the whole deal basically. But on his Wikipedia page, he describes himself as he's an atheist, long-term atheist. So he's only culturally, I think he says culturally Jewish. And I wondered, I actually said it to him, but didn't get a response. He's from Lebanon originally. Him and his family left Lebanon, 30, 40 years ago or more. But he still identifies as a Jew, but he's not a religious Jew. He's atheist, so he has no relationship whatsoever with the religious aspect of Judaism, but he still sees himself as Jewish. I then wondered, would someone like him not see himself more ethnically? Would his identification not be more ethnic with Lebanon and the Middle East, and his ethnic? If you're going to identify with something, and lots of people want to identify with, they kind of need, in a certain sense, as part of the human condition, is to identify themselves as part of something. You're Irish or whatever. Scotty's, where are you from, Scotty? Scotty's American. Everybody, and then there's all these different identity politics that we've seen over the past few years, where people want to associate themselves with some group, some in-group, whatever, to give themselves a sense of identity, which is important for people, right? So, but why, I wondered why in the case of Gad Saad, why, if he has no relationship with a religion at all, how culturally Jewish would be more important to him? Because what other, the first question is, what culture is there that is Jewish that does not involve any religious aspects? It's attachment to
it's complicated because you have to use, Israel is different because you have to use two scales, and one is ethnicity and the other is religion. And they've jumped between the two in their narratives.
Yeah, but if you're someone who has no interest whatsoever in the religion, you're atheist. You think all religions are nonsense. You're just left with being Jewish. But he's from Lebanon. He was born and grew up in Lebanon. He looks like a Middle Easterner. Mm-hmm. So why he would not identify with Middle Eastern people, at least as much as him being Jewish, and culturally Jewish, what's there to hold on to, I mean, people, and the reason it occurred to me is because it's obvious that people all around the world, especially people who have moved from, who come from somewhere else, their origins, their ethnic or their geographic origins are very important to them as an identifier. You have so many Americans coming back to Europe every year, and have done for so long, looking for their roots, and Americans will describe themselves as, 20% Irish or 50% Irish and 50% Scottish or English or French or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's an important part, in human psychology. It's an important aspect, is your ethnic identity. So why would someone put their ethnic identity, their again, I can understand why some people might put their religious identity on the same level as an ethnic identity if the two go together, whatever. But if you remove religion, in the case of Gad Saad and many others like him, because there's a lot of atheistic Jews out there, the only thing they're left with is Jewish cultural. I'm culturally a Jew. And obviously there's an attachment to land there as well, so he would maybe identify with. But he never lived in Israel. He was born in Lebanon. And there's a lot, you know what I mean? It's like, I was just trying to get my head around,
it can be a lifetime to get your head around.
I don't think it makes any sense.
It's super complex.
But I don't think it's complex. I think it doesn't make any sense. It's complex in the sense that it doesn't make any sense, that they have no proper, there's not a rational explanation for it. It's just all emotional. And they don't know why, and they can't give you a proper answer.
Yeah.
It's a belonging, you know.
Yes, and belonging to what?
What do you belong to?
I
Yeah.
know. Is it to an ethnos or is it to a religion? Well, now you're an atheist, but historically, your particular groups, your particular antecedents in Lebanon, say what we call Lebanon today, for them was religion.
Right.
Classic case in point, in fact, is to take Netanyahu himself. His father is an atheist. He's one of the founders of Israel. Ben Zion Netanyahu, he changed his name. His real name is Militowski or something. They're Jews from Poland.
Right.
Their father's father, grandfather, and when I say his father was an atheist, he was Zionism all the way, baby. A Zionism to the right. There's
Right.
Zionism right and Zionism left, whatever. Okay. Their grandfather was a rabbi. And he, as of a Zionist inclination, so he was trying to biblicize a justification for being in that particular part of the world, the homeland, Zion, Judea. You get these breaks from one generation to the next, and you're like, what the hell's the continuum? That's a completely different narrative basis for what they're doing. They've switched from it's for the land to it's for religion and back again. It's like, what the hell? How do you make sense of it?
Yeah, so it comes down to Jews need a homeland, right?
No, not even. Sand's best guess is that at the Roman times, what was happening was you had an actual ethnos of people in what we call Israel today, Jews. And for a while, so for a couple hundred years, Judaism was very different. It was a proselytizing religion. That's totally what we don't know it as today. We know it as exclusivist. And it's all about, can you prove the genetics on your mother's side? You can't just join our religion like that. You have to show that there's genetic history in your family to be one of us, right? For a couple hundred years, that wasn't the case. They were proselytizing to the extent that there were like, some estimates, 6-8 million Jews all around the Mediterranean Empire, which is a lot, not in absolute numbers, but relative to the total size of the population of Rome, the Roman Empire, it was a lot. It spread like crazy. So you have your actual ethnos of Roman Jews in Judea, and you have religious communities springing up all over the place, including in Rome itself, because they were encouraged to bring in Gentiles briefly for 100 years, for a couple hundred years. They were in competition against what would become Christianity as well, which was proselytizing and stuff. And then, but the door on that was shut at some point, and it became exclusivist again for the most part. So Sand's best guess is you've got actual Jews who are religious and ethnically so in Judea, Roman Judea, and communities elsewhere that buy into the religion, and they remain religiously Jews, but later they become their genetic descendant. The ability to prove descendancy as a Jew becomes critical. And over the span of a millennium and a half, those Jewish religious communities elsewhere around the Mediterranean become convinced themselves that they are actually from, because they're being told that this is their history, but it's a biblical narration of history.
Can you be genetically Catholic?
Essentially, you can, because it's so prevalent in where you're from, and it's what your family's always known, and your ancestors.
Well, genetically Catholic. Can you be genetically a supporter of like Barcelona football team?
No. No.
Sure.
It can be traditionally handed down from parent to son, father
But
to
you can
son.
be genetically Jewish.
Right.
But Judaism is religion.
Right.
It's not an ethnicity. It's not an ethnicity. It's not genetic. I mean, all those people who claim to be Jews are just do their 23andMe and they'll see where they're from. They're not from Judaism. They're not from Jewishness.
This is way too complicated for a quick podcast.
But I think very quickly you can see how it's just a load of nonsense. That there's no basis to it or whatever. It's basically what this comes down to is a fight over over land.
Land and the
With all sorts of
and-
narratives
and the
around it.
The privilege of believing that you're special, that you're exceptional, that you're chosen. And look how prevalent that is in people who grasp for power through history. Look at it today. Who is reiterated again by Biden this week? Who is the exceptionalist nation? And before that, the British had British Israelism. They very much believed the same thing. That it became so captured by it, the British Empire on its rise to becoming the British Empire at the peak of the 19th century, that there was a huge kind of religious / nationalistic revival around the idea that, in fact, not only are we close to the Jews, and it's debatable about who they're talking about there, people in Alexandria or in what was then Palestine or somewhere else, but they expressed desire to belief that they supplanted them, that they are the true lost tribe of Israel, the English. And they're not the only ones who've done that. There are people. Aren't there Hebrews in Ethiopia who believe they're the lost tribe, and then they want to believe that, and the lost tribe is somehow it's grasping onto a biblical narrative. Indeed, it's a Jewish one. It's theirs. It comes from their books, and they're not only expressing support and collinearity with the Jews, but in fact we're the real chosen people. We're better than you even. So it's, you know what I mean? So this grasping for
it's a land and power and control conflict. It's a conflict over land and therefore power and control that's clouded or occluded by clown shoes narratives.
Yeah, although for some reason it seemed to have serious effect. Like if you look at the track record of who've been the most powerful. Yeah, the centers of power on this planet, and before the British, the Dutch, Amsterdam.
Just because they're objectively clown shoes narratives doesn't mean that they're not effective. You know what I mean? Some clown shoes narratives, for some reason, really take hold within people. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that they're clown shoes narratives. You know what I mean? It's just nonsense. It's just, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Here, I hope maybe this will illustrate. You remember you were sending me links of this guy on Twitter who. Kyle Undercover. Let's put it up. Don't know why I've never seen one before. I doubt this is the first time someone has done this. So a guy apparently joined the Freemasons somewhere in the US, and he secretly recorded the ceremony of another initiate being brought into the secret society. This is today, like this is, modern times. So have a look at, this is just one clip he showed. He's apparently every day he's releasing a new clip. So check him out. You can probably see the whole ceremony by the end of this week. This is the first one he published. Actually, I want you to read the text first because he describes it accurately. I went undercover with a hidden camera to expose a Freemason, quote, Master Mason degree ritual. I was shocked to learn how much of it comes from ancient Talmudic teachings. Okay, go ahead and play that.
At the East Gate. Grand Master Hierobith, I'm glad to meet you, Russell. Give me the secrets of a Master Mason, or I will take your life.
This is no time or place for the man, no secrets.
Talk not to me about time, place, patience, or the completion of the temple. Give me the secrets of a Master Mason, or I will take your life.
It behooves you in this rude and violent manner thus to demand no secrets. When the temple's complete, if found worthy, you'll then receive them lawfully as I have.
You have passed Jubilo. Me you cannot pass. My name is Jubilum, well known for my determination of character. What I undertake, that I do. Give me the secrets of a Master Mason instantly, for I will take your life.
I will not.
What? Still persist? Then die.
Bonk. You hit him with the holy ham of Antioch. It's very dried out because it's very old.
He was slain, the Grandmaster hired him to build.
Ah, no,
This is
not
no
Ireland.
time for reflection. What shall we do with the body? We'll carry it to the abandoned village temple and the love God. We free.
Temple, as in the
Solomon's.
Solomon's temple.
Agreed.
He's released like 5 clips now together, I think. Maybe there's another one today. Okay. Now, see, you're asking me to make sense of Judaism. It's like asking me to make sense of that. It's obviously clown shoes. But what we know is that that has happened tens of thousands of times all over the West in the last 300 years.
Millions.
Possibly millions of times. This stuff, this amalgamation of elements of Judaism, Christianity, and this kind of atheistic overlay with, quasi-ritual, it's a bit of everything. It's a mishmash. And yet it's ritualistic. They probably haven't changed much in the hundreds of years. I know new lodges are formed, they have variety, and there's some evolution and so on, but they're more or less unchanged for hundreds of years. And that mostly takes part in Protestant societies. It did take part. It began in France, actually. They began a new lodge in Napoleonic times, but it is mostly because officially the Vatican's stance on it since 17 something is that's depraved
That's the work
and
of the
satanic. It's the work of the devil. Don't be involved in it. That's the official.
Well, it's just like a really bad school play.
It's terrible. It's hard. It's ridiculous.
It's like
it's farcical. But it's clown shoes, and yet it binds together people in societies, especially in the upper crust of societies, in the similar way that pro-Zionist talking points lock in our entire Western leadership. It's bonkers. It's clown shoes, and yet here we are.
Like what do you call him? DeSantis.
Yeah.
Saying that we wouldn't exist without Israel. Yeah. Well, then yeah. I mean, as we've said before, and we've said many times before, not just on this topic, but like on many other topics over the past number of years, that it's all clown shoes, and we have to suffer clown shoeiness. But at the same time, people are suffering and dying on the basis of it, on the basis of human stupidity and ignorance and hubris and lots of other things.
That's what takes place behind closed doors. And then in the more serious venues, think tanks, State Department memos, like this beauty. You mentioned it a few shows back. This is just a Wikipedia summary of it. 1996, paper written for Netanyahu. Believe it or not, 30 years ago, he was also Prime Minister of Israel. A clean break, a new strategy for securing the realm. First paragraph, commonly known as the Clean Break Report, as in clean break from the Oslo Peace Accords, is a policy document prepared in 96 by a study group led by Richard Pearl, who went on to co-found PNAC, Project for the New American Century, for Netanyahu, then Prime Minister of Israel. The report explained a new approach to solving Israel's security problems in the Middle East with an emphasis on Western values. It has since been criticizing blah, 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 blah. Its policy recommendations included the removal of Saddam Hussein from power, check, 9 years later, and the containment of Syria, check, about 20 years later, by engaging in proxy warfare and highlighting the possession of weapons of mass destruction.
So that's in Wikipedia.
That's
so
serious stuff
So
that we hear about.
They're basically on that Wikipedia page, and it's in that document. They advocated for containing Syria by engaging in proxy warfare. And what does proxy warfare mean in the context of what actually happened in Syria? It means that the West was backing jihadis because they're the ones who are waging the war against Assad, and that's the containment of Syria was the containment of Syria under Assad by proxy warfare, i.e. by jihadis, by ISIS.
Yeah.
So ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So basically, as we know already, I mean, it's well known that the West was funding and training jihadis, ISIS, Al-Qaeda groups in Syria and in Iraq. for quite a long time. And they did that from the foothold they gained in Iraq by invading Iraq and occupying it for 10 or 12 years. So, again, it's like all of this is out there. We have a broad meta-narrative as to explain everything that's happening. That makes complete sense. It's all called conspiracy theory, but it makes complete sense.
Yes, but you got to be careful where you land on the conspiracy theory. I don't want anyone watching this to think, right, so you're saying it's a conspiracy of Jews. Let's go back to that report. There's more to come, okay? Because you have to... It cuts both ways. It's not them doing it to, quote, us, the West, okay? Do a word search for Douglas Feith. I know, but this is how, like, if you choose reading, watching this, and or, you don't want to leave it as simply that, because everyone goes, oh, it's the Jews then. Sorry, Feith will be mentioned throughout. Maybe just scroll way down. There, second mention. Okay. So in the New York Times op-ed in 2003 about this document, we quote Ian Buruma, don't know who he is, but anyway, Douglas Feith and Pearl advised Netanyahu, who was prime minister, blah, 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 to make a clean break. They also argued that Israeli security would be best served by regime change in surrounding countries. Check, we've seen that. Despite the current mess, this was obviously in the middle of Iraq, Fubar, this is still a commonplace belief in Washington. Okay, in Paul Wolfowitz's own words, the road to peace in the Middle East goes to Baghdad. It has indeed become an article of faith, literally in some cases. And remember, these people are all atheists, faith, right? In Washington, that American and Israeli interests are identical. But this was not always so. But this has become more and more the case. This wasn't always so. And Jewish interests are not the main reason for it now. They're not doing it because we have to suck up to Israel.
No.
It cuts both ways. The guy continues, what we see then is not a Jewish conspiracy, but a peculiar alliance of evangelical Christians, foreign policy hardliners, lobbyists for the Israeli governments and neoconservatives, a number of whom happen to be Jewish.
But the Jews among them, Per Wolfowitz, Crystal.
All of them ex-Trotskyites, definitely not, are more likely to speak about freedom and democracy than about halakha, Jewish law. What unites this alliance of convenience is a shared vision of American destiny and the conviction that American force and a tough Israeli line on the Arabs are the best ways to make the United States strong, Israel safe, and the world a better place.
Well, a world a better place for American hegemony.
Inadvertently or
make
not,
America strong.
Inadvertently or not, last week, RFK Jr. articulated the actual geopolitical, realpolitik rationale for the West's deadly embrace, and I think with Israel and all Israel's interests. I think we've said this before, you've certainly said this before, I couldn't have heard it better from a public figure as to why the United States is so enraptured with Israel. And you understand, I forgive people when they go, oh my God, it looks like the tail is wagging the dog. Holy shit, we don't want to send our boys there to die for Israel's wars, that kind of thing. That's tempting to leave it at that. Oh, it's it's an external source that comes in and makes our country bad. It's Chinese communism. It's Russian influence. Or maybe now, at the end of all things, it's revealed, the curtains pull back. It's the Jews doing it to us. No, it's not that simple. Listen to RFK.
Israel is critical, and the reason it's critical is because it's a bulwark for us in the Mideast. It's almost like having an aircraft carrier in the Mideast. It's our oldest ally. It's been our ally for 75 years. It has been an incredible ally for us in terms of the technology, the exchange, and building the Iron Dome, which we've paid a lot for, has also taught us enormously about how to defend ourselves at home for missiles. So those military expenditures are all going. 75% of it goes to U.S. companies under the agreement, under the MOU. But if you look at what's happening in the Mideast now, Iran is now the closest allies to Iran are Russia and China. Iran also controls all of Venezuela's oil. Hezbollah is in Venezuela. They have propped up the Maduro regime, and so they control that oil supply. BRICS, Saudi Arabia is now joining BRICS, so those countries will control 90% of the oil in the world. If Israel disappears, the vacuum in the Mideast, which is, Israel is our ambassador, it's our presence, our beachhead in the Mideast, and it gives us ears and eyes in the Mideast. It gives us intelligence. It gives us the capacity to influence affairs in the Mideast. If Israel disappeared, Russia and China would be controlling the Mideast, and they control 90% of the world's oil supply, and that would be cataclysmic for U.S. national security. So that's the answer to you.
That is the compassionate version of America's rationale for, quote, having influence in the Middle East. Now you put neocons saying the same things and the things they do, and you've got there's the other side of neocon, neoconservative. That's he just articulated the neoliberal version of it. It's the same thing. And he threw in all the metaphors you could. We've heard it before that Israel is, from an American admiral in the 1950s, that Israel is the United States' unsinkable aircraft carrier. Well, he threw in bulwark, beachhead. Beachhead is the military term for getting an incursion into a place and holding it so that you can spread out in both directions. 90% of the world's energy is in this place. We need to be there. The results otherwise are catastrophic domestically for the United States.
Yeah. So America's fight, it's existential for America.
Do or die. When Netanyahu says it's do or die for Israel, Washington's not going, oh, gosh, it's a bit harsh there, Benny. They're going, yes, it is do or die. It's do or die for both of us. All of Washington, not just the alternatives too, Does Trump think this too? Probably does, He never quite could say it like that, but...
Yeah. Again, people need to understand we've known this for a very long time. We've been writing about it for a very long time, and nothing's changed. Everything that's happened in the years since then, so we're talking, at least 15 up to 20 years, has just proven that our take on it, our understanding of the broad dynamics at play and why everything that was happening in the world is happening, while everybody else gets lost in the nitty-gritty and the narratives around all of the different conflicts and gets lost. They swallow the propaganda and the lies and stuff. But we, and others, I don't know it's not just us, but, saw it for what it was, that it's geopolitical, it's global geopolitics, and it's primarily everything that the past almost 100 years or 100 years or more that has happened in the world has been pretty much everything, all major events, major conflicts, can all be tracked back to America's attempts to maintain its position, to consolidate and maintain and secure its position as the ruler of the world, basically, and attempting to stop other countries from pushing back against that. And there you can just bring it down to a very kind of a moral thing, it doesn't have to be good or bad necessarily. It's like, America rules the world. Lucky America, good for America, right? America's lived high on the hog because it secured that position. But the question then is, how has it ruled the world? How has it gone about being the ruler of the world? How has it treated the vassals? And could it have done it better? Arguably, yes, it could have done it a lot better, and it created a lot of conflict, or provoked a lot of conflict because of the way it was ruling the world, with a heavy hand against other countries that, didn't want to pay all of, their tithes to America.
Everyone basically pays a tax because of the dollar as reserve currency.
And a lot of countries suffered as a result, and their countries lived in relative poverty as a result. And you had people then who different countries who tried to push back against that, and they got punished by the hegemon for it. Right? That's the way of the world, But and you can say, you don't have to be moralistic about it, but you can say that, well, listen, those countries have every right to try and get a bigger piece of the pie. You know what I mean? Especially countries that, by their size, their population, or their natural resources, deserved a bigger part of the pie, deserved to share in the stewardship or the ruling of the world. But America always wanted to be the only ruler, and that's where obviously that's what went wrong, or But then it's the sickness in a certain sense. It's greed and sickness, and and the way,
you start to believe you're the only one capable.
right. You have all these narratives
And
like it would all go to hell. You'd be no good without me. America, the world needs America. et
Without
cetera, et
it,
cetera.
it'll just be a jungle,
Right.
and chaos.
Yeah.
So, you ask the question, what is it that makes a Jew Jewish? Complicated, but in the end, you're like, guys, it's shifting sands. I can't hang my hat on anything. It depends on whether you're an atheist or whether you're actually originally from the region or whatever.
But the reason I asked the question is because I know the answer. At least I know the answer. The answer that makes sense to me, which is that it's the way it's expressed today, and the way Jews see themselves, and the identity that Jews have today, especially the ones that are kind of political Jews, if you know what I mean, or political Zionists. Well, there's no basis for it. It's basically, it's clothed in all these narratives and all these apparently complicated narratives, but what it actually is just a drive for power and control.
Yeah. And what we saw there with the clean break document from 96, one of the emphasis in the document is how are we going to make our Israeli security interests synonymous with, quote, Western values. Well, that's another, it's a modern, it doesn't have the same roots as, Judaism, but it's another thing. What ultimately are Western values,
Mm-hmm.
I thought this speech from Assad, president of Syria, last year was a great summary of Western values. A speech he gave to Parliament in Damascus, March 2022. It's got subs. In. Bummer. Okay.
Jump it forward a bit. No, can't do it.
I couldn't find it anywhere else. I remember the first time I saw it was on YouTube. It's probably the nicks from there.
Anyway, we'll put it in the description and see if people can watch it after.
Yeah.
Memory TV.
Obviously, this is a guy who is come face to face with Western values.
Mhm.
His description is like, it's acerbic, but right to the point. I mean, basically, their interests, it's whatever their interests are. And he was just giving several examples. Obviously, in March 2022, the recent example was Ukraine and Azov. And how on earth would a Jewish Zelensky, president of Ukraine, be obviously associating with actual Nazi, tattooed Nazis, for freedom and democracy, and all these convoluted narratives. Instead, when you strip them away, what you're left with is whatever advances their material interest. That's it.
Yeah,
That's Western
exactly.
values.
Yeah.
That's
Material interest.
you strip all that. I love the way he did it because he peeled off the layers of the ideology, which could be religious,
Mhm.
it could be modern atheistic type ideological stuff. Whether if for Israelis that would be Zionism, for Westerners that would be freedom and democracy, right? And you strip, and he did a strip of it, and you're left with, it's whatever we want, and we're going to do whatever it takes to get it. Speaking of Assad, France issued an international arrest warrant for him last week. This is actually a novel development. This has happened before to past leaders of countries. This is the first time they put a red notice through Interpol for a current acting leader of another country. So it hasn't got a leg to stand on in international case law. But still, it's not a good omen, because what they're trying to get him on in the warrant is the use of a chemical weapon in eastern Ghouta.
That old thing.
Ghouta 2013, eastern Damascus.
I would refer you back to the proxy war that America waged via
Exactly.
jihadis to unseat Assad from 2011 to 2016 or thereabouts, and the methods they used to try and unseat him, one of which was to use chemical weapons and blame Assad
France has issued an arrest warrant for Assad over the alleged use of banned chemical weapons against civilians in Syria. 2 investigative judges on Tuesday issued 4 warrants against his brother, himself, 2 other officials for complicity and blah, 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 blah. I'm a bit worried about this. This isn't a good omen because Ghouta 2013 was the first one. Mm-hmm. This was to be the red line. Mm-hmm. I think it was July 2013. It was the red line Obama had set in a speech a couple of weeks before. That was, it looked like to everyone's appearances, all appearances, that it was the justification neocon America and or Israel needed to launch an Iraq-style regime change against Syria. It was called off at the last minute. Otherwise, still to this day, we don't know why. But they were weapons hot, ready to go, and then they allowed a vote in Congress and Parliament in the UK. And
strangely,
they all just voted against. But obviously, because the senators and MPs were told to make it so, because the decision had been taken behind closed doors not to do it anyway. So here we are 10 years later, and they're bringing up that again. It's unfinished. It smacks of unfinished business. There's a vengeance factor here. We're going to get you one way or the other.
Go.
Yeah. Which is what you're worried about, that he may be
in the crosshairs. But well, the Russian said, Putin said a couple of weeks ago, he warned about certain parties involved in the conflict in Palestine, Israel-Palestine. He warned that they might take this opportunity to settle old scores.
Right.
A bit cryptic, but yeah, certainly Assad would figure as a possibility there, you know. Speaking of Ukraine, this is kind of like...
It still exists. It's not 4-4 yet, right? Ukraine.
Well, you might have forgotten about Ukraine. Poor Zelensky, you know, he's not the man of the hour anymore, but they're still... You know, never say die, basically. This is, I don't know who this guy is, but obviously it's some NGO, whatever, or some organisation, probably affiliated with the government, whatever, but sending, just play it there, sending trucks to Hiluxes or something with, you know,
I am
machine gun
here
mounts.
with the guys from Cars for Ukraine. And we have
I've seen them before.
Cars for Ukraine.
The Hiluxes and Mitsubishi L200s that are going up to the front. And these guys are special because they do all the armour plating on here too. And they also fit armoured turrets to the top. And they call these the Bandera mobiles, obviously because of Stefan Bandera. Right.
Obviously because Stefan Bandera, the well-known Nazi. Let's put his picture on the trucks that we're sending to Ukraine.
Job. And all, of course, from Great Britain.
Lovely.
British Reg.
Because it's Stefan Bandera. What a nice
Best of
guy.
British, best of Nazis.
Tally ho, let's support the Nazis in Ukraine.
So if you would like to sponsor a car,
That's
Ukraine,
Western values.
I'll
There's
put
no
a-
principle
there.
whatsoever.
You just pause it there. Because, you know,
We'll fight them on the beaches.
the Nazis bombed me granny.
Churchill, well,
The
that
Nazis
all meant
bombed me.
nothing.
Nazis bombed me granny in the war. So now we're going to send some trucks to neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Makes sense, right?
It makes sense.
It's not clown shoes.
It's clown shoes. Yeah, I've seen that guy before. And of course, it makes you wonder, was his company or similar involved in sending retrofitted Mitsubishis to ISIS in 2014? Maybe? No.
Yeah.
Because where did they get that idea from?
For sure.
Well, yeah. Do you want to say anything else on Ukraine?
Ukraine is, we just have to wait and see. It's not looking good, but it's slowly, quietly going by. I think the Russians, we don't have to wait and see, but I think the Russians might be gearing up. I don't know what capability they have or what their plans are. Obviously, I don't have a hotline to the Kremlin, although I'd like one. But I know you thought I did, but I don't.
Troll.
But I haven't been getting my paycheck from the Kremlin recently, so I don't know what's going on there anymore. But I suspect that if the opportunity presents itself, the Russians, there has been talk or scaremongering amongst the Kiev crowd, the pro-Ukrainian crowd, that the Russians are going to planning a Maidan 3, they supposedly are calling it, in Kiev. Because you had first two Maidans. People think 2014 was the only Maidan. There was another, according to the Russians anyway, there was, or at least allegedly the Russians believe that there was another Maidan previously in, I think 2004, yeah. Another Western-backed orange revolution, they called it at the time. And then the actual Maidan 2014, that was the actual successful coup that led to the Russia being provoked to invade Ukraine and defend itself and the Russian speakers in Ukraine. So now the time is ripe the moment is it's a good moment for, or the time has come, let's say, for Russia to kind of finish the job if possible in Ukraine, now that the West is looking away towards the Middle East and funds and the weapons are relatively drying up. Things, it depends. Are they able to, is the West able and willing and able to kind of prop up Zelensky and the government in Kiev? Of course they could get rid of Zelensky and shoo someone else in or whatever, but it's difficult when a country like that basically, loses a war and all the chickens come home to roost in a certain sense, and if their backers kind of tend to walk away or start walking away, then the whole thing can collapse very quickly into all sorts of internal conflicts and stuff. And that's an opportunity for Russia to provoke some from the outside. So it's whether or not the West is willing and able, like I said, to continue to do at least the bare minimum to prop up the Kiev regime, if not continue the war very much anymore, but to basically try and freeze it along the lines and without admitting it, allow Russia to keep the 4 territories that it has annexed, and then just see what happens. But I think other factors will intercede as well in terms of from a global perspective.
Well,
on the future of Ukraine, it's not looking good. The future of Ukraine isn't looking good if there are other major events in terms of the global economy, etc., etc.
I think what it might come down to is, can Russia or the US focus on 2 theaters at once? Have a look at this. This is last week. It's just flared up and there's been nothing on it since. I try to find an update. Nope. Al Jazeera, others reported it. ISIS, whatever, attacks kill 30 in Syrian desert. They just popped up out of nowhere, killing 30 Syrian pro-government militia and soldiers stationed in the desert. Now, the Syrians themselves said, we know where they came from. They came from Al-Tanf, which houses a US base in the southern Syria in the desert. And the advance by ISIS in the desert last week, suppressing them, involved Russian jets taking off from Latakia. So you come full circle on both issues, Assad, Syria, and Ukraine. Remember in 2013, that was August when that was called off. September, October, the protests start in Maidan. And by February next year, there's a coup. And now we have a situation where I don't know who will be tested most by that. I presume the Russians have less resources to try to do both. If they make, I suspect, here's an idea, if they make a move in Ukraine in this fall and winter, that might be like a cue to finally, quote, deal with Assad by the West.
Who makes a move? Who makes a move?
If the Russians
make a move in Ukraine,
a reverse Maidan or a regime change, we take back, quote, what's our sphere of influence. The other side will be like, well, okay, we're getting Syria, because the two things, I can't ever forget that they're so related chronologically. That Red Line and Ghouta and chemical attack was followed by Maidan in a matter of weeks. You know what I mean? The two things have dovetailed this last decade. And here we are, Ukraine's at an impasse, and the whole, obviously, Middle East is on tenterhooks as to what will open up next, you know? So, yeah, no, I won't make a prediction, but I'm just emphasizing the point that the two issues are probably connected. Presumably the US thinks they can stretch Russia here. ISIS flares up last week, Russian jets handle it. But if they create a situation such that Russian jets probably ought to leave Syria because it's untenable or it's too risky for them to be too stretched to try to deal with both countries at once, they might try to force Russia out of one situation, which most likely will be Syria, because Russia clearly has the dominant hand in Ukraine, right?
Right. Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
You see these protests in Spain?
Yeah.
¿Qué es esto?
Dude, don't even
They've
get-
been brewing.
Do you want me to say it again?
I don't think we haven't said it on the show. You said it to me. Put
What?
that up, Scotty. This has been brewing for a few
I
weeks.
said
But
already, clown shoes. Go on
the
ahead.
biggest protest in Spain against Catalan amnesty law draws 170,000 on the 18th, which is yesterday. 170,000 people marched through Madrid in the largest protest against an amnesty law which Spain's socialists agreed over Catalonia's 2017 separatist bid in order to form a government. Okay. 2017, Catalan separatists attempted to hold a independence referendum.
Mm-hmm.
And Spanish police are sent in to beat a lot of heads. And apparently hundreds of people ended up arrested and or imprisoned.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the amnesty refers to, letting them out. Because in the last general election in Spain, the incumbent Socialist Party technically got fewer votes than the largest Conservative Party, I think. And to form a coalition government, they were going to need the support of the Catalonian independence. So the Catalonians said, fine, if you grant amnesty, which just happened, sparking this biggest protest yet. No one's ever said it, but I presume part of the tension involved here is a fear that because they're now in power in Madrid, there's a risk of the Catalan separatists being able to hold another independence referendum, this time one recognized by the Spanish state.
I doubt it. I don't think that's the point. It's again, I look at there's so many things going on in this clown shoes. Like the thing that brought this to my attention was a couple of conservative US of all people conservative commentators. What's that guy called? Jack
Prosobiec.
Whatever his name, yeah, him, and then Tucker Carlson actually going to Madrid, talking to the Vox, which is the conservative kind of offshoot of Conservative Party leader, and yeah, I can understand why that would get Tucker over there, because basically Vox is like an offshoot of in the same way like the MAGA crowd, let's say, are an offshoot of the Republicans in America. Vox is an offshoot of the mainstream Conservative Party in Spain, and Vox is this hardline, anti-woke, nationalist, anti-immigrants, all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. So I mean, but the way they characterize it, that like in the elections this summer in Spain, government elections, no party got enough votes to actually form a government. Mm-hmm. So there's been a wrangling, which happens in several different European countries and their governments. A lot of them end up having to form coalition governments with other parties. It's very normal, very common, happens all the time. And the socialists in Spain, in this case, made a deal with some of the smaller parties, one of them being the Catalan pro-independence party, in order to get enough seats.
Which kind of ended up being the kingmaker because they're a sizable minority.
Yeah.
Coherent minority.
But they needed the others as well. They added several others.
It's more than just them.
Yeah, more than just them, several others.
Okay.
And,
Podemos, probably, the far left.
Well, also the Basque and the Galicians as well. But so they needed all of them, and they formed a government that way. And that happens all the time. Whichever of the two main parties, the left or the right party, is able to strike a deal with other minority parties, they're the ones. In the case of a hung election where nobody gets enough seats, whichever one does the best deals and gets enough seats basically to form a government, then a majority in the parliament, then they form the government. And that's it. It happens all the time. But apparently everybody freaked out this time mainly because they were, in Spain at least, not necessarily with Tucker, because Tucker then tags on the whole, well, in Spain anyway, the main problem was that they were forming a coalition with the Catalan independence groups who had tried to have a referendum for independence 7 or 8 years ago, and it was kind of put down by the state, not allowed to you're not allowed to have an independence vote. You're not allowed to secede from Spain. It's against the constitution, and they beat heads in polling stations, all that kind of stuff. Quite anti-democratic.
And then
that was
Russia, by the way, call it a Russian influence
blamed Russia, of
operation.
course, on everything. And then that was the end of it. And some of them were put in prison. One of them, the leader of it, was sent into exile, basically, to Belgium. So the problem this time is that informing the government with, among others, this Catalan Independence Party, the deal was that they would give amnesty to these people who were put in prison and the guy who was put into exile.
And that's the extent of it.
That's it. Except this Vox Party, which is a kind of, let's say, right-wing, more right-wing than the conservative, traditional conservative party, they've been on a campaign of basically an anti-woke, populist, and kind of like they've been on that
new right.
Yeah, they've been on that thing, basically the anti-woke narrative, for as long as it's been around for the past number of years, whatever. So radicalizing the right, populist, all that kind of stuff, and
Spanish MAGA.
Yeah, Spanish MAGA, basically, and they. So they're talking it up. The leader of that party's talking it up like this is like a socialist takeover and it's anti-constitutional. But when you listen to him, he doesn't have anything other than his usual gripes about lefty, wokey socialist parties, complaining about those. Obviously, a right-wing party would say that, particularly in the current political climate in the West. But his main thing is this is a horrible situation where they're actually daring to give amnesty to these Catalan leaders.
Well, I listened to some of his interview with Tucker. The language is even further than that. He says that this socialist party is so corrupt, etc., etc. He's all hanging around about the corruption. Yeah, that's part of the course. But also that what they're doing here by granting amnesty, this is a coup d'etat.
How?
That it's illegitimate. This would be an illegitimate government.
How?
That's what he got Tucker to tell the
I know, but
Anglosphere.
it's not true. It's obviously not true.
I know, it's hyperbole.
I mean, you can say all that kind of stuff he wants, but again, these kind of right wing, just to make it difficult for us and for anybody trying to make sense of it, or trying to see if you should agree or disagree or figure out what stance you should take on it in the situation in Spain. That guy, that leader of the Vox Party,
Abascal.
Yeah, Abascal. He has been fervently pro-Ukraine and anti-Russian, and he is currently fervently pro-Israel.
Naturally, they all are. New rights. It's crazy how.
So pick it out of that, but the weird thing is, this is again clown shoes, because like he's nationalist, right? So Spain whole, no, his main problem is any part of Spain, and there's 13 autonomous regions of one description or other in Spain. So that they have to, Spain, the country, patria,
they have to manage that.
They all have to stay together. There's no possibility of any of those countries seceding, right? Like they had the whole issue with ETA in the past, during the 70s and 80s and 90s. But there's several of those reasons that are more nationalistic, let's say. And this is where you get into it. So you have the nationalistic Vox Party, which is Spain unified and whole, and nobody's allowed to break away. And for traditional conservative, Catholic, anti-gay, anti-woke, anti-immigration values, and that's nationalism supposedly, right? Mm-hmm. All that together is their nationalist agenda. But they're screaming bloody murder at the socialist government, making a deal with minority parties, including the Catalan Independence Party,
which would help keep Spain cohesive, at least in the short term.
Yes, but also and the Galician Nationalist Party in the northwest of Spain, and the Basque Nationalist Party, which is basically the political party of ETA, the terrorist group, quote-unquote terrorist group. So, whose nationalism is on first there?
I know.
Is it Spanish nationalism? Like, who would you say is the most nationalist? Like, go on, or even most conservative. Go and talk to some long-term Basque nationalists who have fought, who had family members who fought physically to try and gain independence for the Basque region and their language and their values, whatever they are Basque nationalistic values conservative? I'd say they're probably more conservative than lefty.
The more north you go in Spain, the more Catholic.
So exactly. So, but you have that a group like that, a party like that, and in Galicia and in Catalonia, aligning with a socialist government, helping the socialist government to form an actual government, so socialist party to form a government, and they're being attacked for being radical lefty, woke, anti-Spanish nationalism, by the Spanish Nationalist Party. But you could say that about the Socialist Party in Spain, that they're radical lefty woke, whatever, and they don't care about Spain breaking up, whatever. But when it comes to pure nationalism and populism, I don't think Vox Party are the people who subscribe to it, and there's quite a few because of the protests in Spain. I don't think they would win a nationalism contest with Basque nationalists or Galician nationalists or even Catalonian nationalists. So which nationalism are we talking about here? You see how clown shoes it is?
It is. But they would say we would win because we have the state power. And the Spanish army behind us.
And exactly.
Therefore NATO.
Well, Madrid, central government, whatever. But you probably don't have to think too hard to imagine who in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, who the Basque party that is aligned now in government with the socialists, who they support.
Right.
And who the socialists, at least nominally, well, the socialists are like any socialist government in Spain. The Socialist Party are like any socialist party in any European country.
They have a government minister. I think she's Podemos, but whatever. She's minister for social something housing or whatever. She's up there every day.
Pro-Palestinian.
Pro-Palestinian.
Yeah.
Ceasefire now.
Yeah.
In fact, she's calling for the ambassador of Israel to be expelled.
But they're not going to. They're not going to go much further, basically. In the same way as the Irish minister, some Irish politicians, etc., or even ministers would be pro-Palestinian, but you're not going to get the actual government, the actual prime minister and the cabinet to actually come out and take an anti-Israel stance. Like in Ireland, a traditionally very pro-Palestinian country, like the population very pro-Palestinian, and members of the government having that inclination as well. You had the Prime Minister Micheál Martin heading off to
Israel
and parleying with the Israeli government. So none of them are going to cross that line. They can't. No official government.
But at least in Europe, you get the articulation of such things.
Yes, for sure.
In America, it's practically illegal.
Yeah.
The land of free speech. It's illegal in X number of states to be critical of Israel. I mean, it's anti-Semitism right off the bat. Yeah. For me, it's a tad suspicious how Tucker Carlson can afford to just drop everything and fly anywhere in the world, especially in the West, right as trouble in that country brews over something to do with establishment left versus populist right. He did that in Argentina as well recently. I'm like, right as the wave of Javier Milei became popular in his campaigning, he goes down there and introduces him to Americans. Oh yeah, he's one of us. And he did that obviously with Vox last week. Speaking of Milei, that is the runoff in Argentina is right now. Probably Milei is going to win. He's up against a Peronista, which in Argentina's context means he's the establishment candidate. Milei is the outsider, pro-Trump, pro-America, pro-Israel. He's a nutcase. No prizes. I just said what he is. No prize for guessing where he stands on the Middle East. You can. This is a video of him yesterday while on campaign. This guy is so pro-America. He wants Argentina to have the US dollar as its official currency. But yeah, meet Israel. Argentina's likely new president. Argentinian, Jewish, I believe. Javier Milei. Some people are anti-woke. This guy is like, line him up against the wall and shoot him. Anti-woke. I'm joking, but maybe I shouldn't, because this could seriously turn into a Pinochet situation. Yeah, what's horrifying about the right support for Israel is that you get the general sense from Argentina to Spain to anywhere that their entry into power is contingent on absolute support for Israel. Mm-hmm. On any other issue than that, they'll have free rein to go massive in their backlash against the left when they get in, right? Mm-hmm. Provided it's 100% support for Israel, like Viktor Orban in Hungary. Mm-hmm. You know, Sounds great. It does great things. Great for family, protects the country borders. The American Tucker flies out there, interviews him. Wow, what, this is awesome. The only country in Europe that votes against a fucking ceasefire 3 weeks ago at the UN.
Right.
3 countries on earth: USA, Israel, and Hungary.
Voted against the ceasefire.
Orban voted. He directed his ambassador to vote against ceasefire. Now, yeah, that backlash is coming, but when it's coming, it's going to be on certain terms, and it could be horrific. We really could we could revert to the classical situation where the right is how the left has always portrayed it, and has been accurately the case in the 20th century, as being the tyrannical, cracking heads, concentration camps, deportations, mass arrests, surveillance, crackdown on the left. That could come, but it's so creepy how it's like it's been contained thus far. We had 4 years of Trump, but we saw how contained that was while he was in office. He was under constant pressure, right, from Russiagate. It's like it's being held back on a leash, and it could be just let go, more or less overnight everywhere. Obviously, it depends on when the election takes place in each country. But the New York Times had an article last week on Trump's plans for camps and mass deportations of migrants when he gets in, if he gets in, Or in France, consider last week the anti-Semitism march. You noticed that in Paris last week. It was kind of a Charlie Hebdo, just to be Charlie. They've done this before. It wasn't the first anti-Semitism march, a call to the public. Well, about 100,000 people turned up. And, it's ostensibly it's anti-Semitism, but it's really like pro-Israel, whatever. They weren't waving Israeli flags, but you had at the front ex-presidents, the Archbishop of Paris, Flamby was there, Sarko, President Macron didn't attend, but still, it's obviously under his aegis that it's been called, the rally for Israel, basically. And who else is there? Shoulder to shoulder. Up till now, she's been like kryptonite for them. Shoulder to shoulder with the establishment figures is Marine Le Pen.
Yeah. Dude, they're all just in it for the lols. Like you said, it's just for whatever they want. Everybody's in it for themselves, and there's the ones ruling the roost, basically, and dictating the course of events are all just the psychos and the mad narcissists. And obviously what they want is whatever gets them their jollies, and depending on the position that they're in, if they're president of a country or if they have a lot of weapons and military prowess behind them, then they're going to use that if necessary to get whatever they want. And if their back's up against the wall, they're going to kill people and slaughter people, and they don't care because they're psychos, right? So there's nothing else behind it. You know what I mean? There's nothing else. There's no all the philosophy and the ideologies and the freedom and democracy and anti-terrorism and all that kind of stuff. It's all patent nonsense.
But the whole West was born in Israel thousands of years ago. Yeah,
sure it was. Whatever. If you want to believe that, go ahead. It's just
mystique.
Bollocks. Huh?
The mystique.
It's
because as Jordan Peterson said, their lives are so meaningless. They have to make up this bullshit.
It's clothing your lowbrow bullshit wants and needs in some fanciful, convoluted narrative, and people do it all the time. It's pretty horrible to see it when it's writ large across the globe by psychos, So, yeah.
Is it time for a joke?
Yes.
I've got one.
Go on.
How many Israelis does it take to screw in a light bulb?
Oh, how many?
0. It's already in the house they stole.
Oh my God, that's anti-Semitic, Neil.
No, it's not. It's anti-Zionist.
Oh, sorry.
Important distinction. Don't ever let them conflate.
We navigated all the way through this without saying anything anti-Semitic.
It's a joke.
At the very end, they're the worst.
It said how many Israelis? I didn't say Jews.
That's the worst kind of anti-Semitism is when it's framed as a joke. It's even more hurtful.
Well, come on, Sacha Baron Cohen. Throw the Jews down. I didn't.
Neil.
He. It's his song.
Neil. Listen, a ham sandwich walks into a bar and orders a beer.
Is there fries with that?
A bartender says, "Sorry, we don't serve food here." All right. Anyway,
that was bad.
Well, it's better than your anti-Semitism, your rampant anti-Semitism. So that's enough of that for this week. What are people saying? Did they?
They're lolling.
They're lolling. Well, you got to loll a bit, because what else you can do?
You go mad otherwise.
Nonsense. I'm telling you, people, just remember, it's all clown shoes. It's all nonsense and clown shoes. And yeah, real people, especially vulnerable, innocent people and children, are suffering and dying at the hands of these psychos, but it can't last forever, and it won't last forever, and they'll be their own undoing in the end. And we just have to try and avoid the collateral damage, avoid being collateral damage in the disaster that they create, basically, because they will create a disaster because of their hubris and their arrogance and their psychopathy. Anyway,
amen.
So we'll leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for watching, listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week with another one. Until then, have a good week and keep our country. See ya.
Thanks for watching. Bye, all.
Can't stop the signal now.